Hello everyone, it's Jonathan here from Concur. Thank you all for attending today. Really appreciate your time this afternoon. And thanks for Nolan Business Solutions inviting you. To introduce myself, I own partnerships for Concur UK. We've got a number of shared customers with Nolan's and have a long-standing relationship. Obviously, they maintain and support your accounting, package and finance systems, and are able to assist you in using Concur and integrating into your accounting package. So we've got about half an hour today, and what I wanted to do is just introduce the concepts of expense management. It might be something that is fairly sort of foreign at the moment, that you might be using a paper-based sort of process for. Just want to sort of talk you through some of the benefits of looking at how to automate expenses. Then I'm going to show you the Concur mobile app and some of the sort of features, functionalities, and how that might be better kind of used by your employees. And finally, just to kind of walk through some of the customer successes we've had, some of the kind of learnings from that. And sort of wrapping off with a case study with a company called Huddle. So, I think many of you on the call today will be heads of finance, sitting in a finance team, and undoubtedly share some of the frustrations and problems around expenses today that are on your screen right now. What we tend to find, right away from right across the small business through to large multinational firms, the sort of first and foremost problem is around employee productivity when it comes to expenses, and that every employee is spending on average 2-3 hours a month not only kind of processing the expenses and the paper receipts, the VAT treatments attached to those receipts at the end of the month, but also kind of throughout the course of the month having to take copies of all those kind of items. So it's a huge productivity challenge. Forrester Consulting a couple of years ago did a survey and found that on average every end employee spends on average 2 hours a month doing that. So it's a big sort of problem of the overall kind of business. But I think sitting in finance, I think one of the challenges of AP and the sort of finance team is how that productivity hits you, and that having to approve expenses, having to audit to ensure that they reconcile against the receipt, having to look at possibly looking at policy violations. Ultimately, you're buried at the moment in a lot of paper. It means that there's a lot of data entry that you have to do, and it's not something that really you might have time for today. It creates a big bottleneck in a process, and that ultimately means without the sort of ability to digitize and aggregate all that data, you've got paper-based information. Auditing is a real problem. If you're ever audited by HMRC and have to kind of report on kind of the VAT you've reclaimed and what you actually incurred, that's a kind of a huge challenge. And we find a lot of customers who actually sort of consider looking at expense automation when they've undergone or have having a sort of future in a sort of HMRC audit underway. The other sort of aspect of return that we find a lot of customers looking at and a lot of challenges around is the VAT. The fact that you might be doing a lot of mileage. Are you collecting the fuel for mileage receipts? We find a lot of customers, because of how sort of time intensive having to process the fuel for mileage receipts, having to sort of allocate business travel versus personal travel and splitting those out. And then if you're transacting internationally, you might be incurring travel and expenses internationally, or even from an invoice perspective. There's a lot of VAT often locked into the receipts on paper, and it might mean that you're kind of having to physically go into those receipts and identify what the total VAT per receipt is, or it just might be something that falls to the wayside at the moment. Again, if you've set a policy, an expense policy, you know that every time you kind of start a company, you agree to an expense policy, and it quickly falls by the wayside. And it's not necessarily an intentional thing by an employee, but they're making spend decisions, and they're often making spend decisions out of the existing policy that you've set. So it means policies aren't followed, and the exception handling process when they aren't followed means that the time to reimburse is slow. It also, ultimately impacts reimbursement times and employee satisfaction. We find that a lot of employees tend to feel that, hey, I've incurred an expense, in the course of business, doing my job, and it's taking 6 weeks to get paid. So, it sort of touches a couple of different areas. And, if you're sitting on the call today, interested in learning more about expense automation, undoubtedly you're not using a solution today, or you're looking at a sort of paper or Excel or web portal based solution. It's often because they're cheap, they're often free, and it's difficult to associate the actual sort of costs of expenses. It's difficult to justify moving from a process today where you're doing it for free into a sort of more automated sort of area where you've got to pay for a solution. And I think the challenge with a lot of the customers that we talk to that are yet to make an investment is that the cost of expenses are sort of felt across the business. They're felt across kind of sales and consulting. If you've got a lot of consultants or engineers billing the time out to clients, that sort of productivity challenge impacts sales. It impacts the top line revenue of your company. But again, it's something that productivity is never a defined line item on a balance sheet. So there's a huge sort of return area for sales sort of growth, consulting hours growth, and moving sort of the productivity challenge away from your employees. I spoke briefly by then about the VAT. We found that kind of a huge return area, and any customer looking to make an investment in expense automation, whatever vendor, typically can make a significant proportion of that investment back from the more VAT that they're able to reclaim every year. Finally, I think the pressure on AP to scale as companies are growing. You might be internationally expanding, or even looking at reducing your cost base. And the challenge when it comes to time on the AP team and the extra, the additional headcount sometimes it requires, depending on the size of your business, means it's a kind of challenge to growth. It's a challenge to achieving the objectives of finance and ultimately working on more strategic initiatives to the business as opposed to the data entry of expenses. So ultimately there's a lot of cost that's felt across the business, across a number of different areas. There's never a single line item which is the total cost of our end-to-end expense plus the management of that expense. And to talk about the productivity again, the sort of productivity challenge, I was actually talking to a engineering client. They're based in Dublin, a multinational sort of engineering customer, a number of offices in Europe. They've got about 250 to 300 engineers across the European offices. They're working with clients on client sites and having to incur expenses, often for several weeks at a time. At the end of the month, they're each spending 2 hours. And this is a kind of real challenge of not only kind of FD, but the commercial director as well, where we've got these 300 people, all highly skilled, highly paid engineers, each spending 2 hours. They looked at sort of across the business, irrespective of the reclaim opportunity, irrespective of the time it takes finance and the bandwidth challenges within finance. They kind of reasoned that over the span of those 300 engineers, each working month, by improving that process of automating expenses and taking out all the manual sort of photocopying and Excel sort of input, they can save 75 working days a month. So it goes to show that, as a business scales, as there's employees sort of incurring expenses, the ability to streamline that a bit more effectively has a huge impact on the productivity of your employees. What's interesting to note is those, the 300 engineers are each out to clients, each visiting clients. They're all making their own spend decisions, and to talk to the policy sort of topic earlier on. These engineers are, choosing which accommodation, choosing which travel to fly out on site to, choosing where to go for dinner, where to entertain, and how to entertain their customers. And this is all, it all might be predefined within a policy, but ultimately, at the moment, and before any kind of automation, finance sits after a spend decision is made, and that's kind of a really crucial, crucial sort of step that only coming in after the fact, after a decision has been made, means that more cost is incurred within the business. Means that from a, how the kind of business views finance and expenses, almost as a cost or burden, as opposed to an enabler, having to resubmit expenses after a claim hasn't been approved because of a policy violation. So changing the sort of way and changing the frame and position at which finance come into an expense kind of process, or the life cycle of expenses, is not only crucial for cost, but also the view of finance within the kind of line of business. And what's enabling and what's sort of changing, and the important thing that business users are now facing is a total kind of shift in the way they run their business and the way they operate. If you think about sort of going to your local bank branch, even 10, 15 years ago, for any transaction, however big, however small, having to sort of pay, pay someone, set up a direct debit, you had to go to the back, you had to go to the physical branch. Now you've got Barclays, Pingit, Santander, banking apps on your iPhone, on your mobile device, which means you're empowered to make decisions in real time wherever you are. And that sort of consumer experience is being expected by the line of business, and the productivity benefits doing so, is also expected. And we see expenses being exactly the same, that instead of being sort of mandated to come into the office, to have to submit and to physically pass over to one of your sort of members of staff and the finance team a physical report, being able to do that on the go, being able to take photos and enter information from your mobile device if you work remotely, it reduces the reimbursement time. It improves employee satisfaction, ultimately gives them the power to run their business however they want, whenever they want, on whatever device they might be using. So to introduce Concur and where we fit into the equation, the sort of main thrust of today's sessions being around our kind of expense capabilities. We're actually an end-to-end spend management platform, and the sort of ethos behind us is that whatever spend, whatever decentralized spend that your business is incurring from the end employee, you have a 360-degree view through Concur, and it really covers three main kind of components. There's travel, so if you're working with a travel management company but don't have visibility into the inventory and don't have the visibility into the cheaper inventory, then we provide a booking tool to book and manage travel. Obviously, kind of expense, being able to manage, automate, and report and analyze the expense life cycle. It's kind of the mainstay of Concur and what we're well known for. We also have a very strong invoice component as well, so being able to take supplier invoices coming into the business, digitize them, reduce the duplication efforts, automate the workflow, ultimately giving you the power and the visibility to see into all that data in real time. But as I mentioned, we're going to focus on expense today, and I wanted to take 5-10 minutes to show you the mobile app. The important thing to know as well is that the mobile app's actually available on every mobile device, iPhone, and you can actually freely download it on the App Store. We have an app on Android, BlackBerry, and Windows as well. So you're able to, whatever device your employees are bringing or have been issued, they're able to use Concur. And interestingly enough, the Concur mobile app is one of the most widely used apps within business today. 30 million users use Concur, and it's partly down to the sort of consumer-grade experience that it has. I'll show you in a second how sort of easy it is to use, and it has kind of the same look and feel as Facebook, as some of the kind of messenger apps you might use. So I'm just going to load up my mobile phone just to show you and to take an example receipt. So you can see from the main screen, there's actually kind of two apps that we're going to talk about today. There's Concur, the top left, and just right underneath that there's Expensit. Expensit, kind of cool. It's an OCR, or optical character recognition app, and what that does is you take a photo and it pulls all the data from that receipt automatically, so that the expense items being populated automatically. It reduces user input, it reduces the time, but most importantly, it improves adoption because it's easy to use, and it sort of removes the double-edged sort of productivity sword and helps the end user to actually kind of do the day job instead of process expenses. So it's going to go into Expensit and take a photocopy, a photo of that receipt. I'll just click Use at the bottom there, and what I'll do is it uploads to the cloud. So it takes about a minute to actually process. And what the other sort of thing to note with kind of Concur as a cloud service is that if you do have a if you do have a sort of poor signal or don't have internet connection, what it does is uploads it to your user profile, so that it uploads it when you do have an internet connection. That's important because sometimes you might have a bit of downtime and you're on a train, you're on a plane, you're doing your expenses, a sort of good use of otherwise time that would be wasted. So whilst that's loading, it'll take about a minute. I'm going to go into the main Concur app. As you can see, there's four sort of main areas. I can view the trips that I've booked. I can also go to the bottom left there, as you can see highlighted, and book travel. And I'm actually going to show you one of the kind of nifty features of booking travel and how it ultimately helps your company reduce spend. So I'm actually going to click Book Hotel there. And it's just sort of pulling up an example search. So I want a hotel on Friday evening in London. I'm going to click Search. And what that's going to do is across, much like Expedia or Skyscanner, across all of the available inventory that my travel management company provides to Concur. It'll pull up all the available inventory, so it actually gives me, as an employee, all the options, and I can choose from the best one. But what I can do is, within finance, is actually promote people to make better spend decisions. So if you can see at the top, although I selected a hotel in London, it's actually the first result is the Copthorne in Slough, and that's because we used to have an office in Slough, and we negotiated a better rate with the Copthorne. So it's actually pushing me to make a better decision to save my company money. And if you can look at the price to beat, £187, that's the kind of most expensive hotel I could have booked that was in policy. And underneath the prices, I can earn points. And over the course of the year, I can earn a point on points on booking travel, and it means that I actually benefit myself and from all those points, and can book personal travel with those points. So again, it's a nice way of incentivizing better spend decisions. So that's kind of travel. Again, I really wanted to show you the expense sort of component. So I'm just going to click at the bottom middle there to take a receipt, take a photo receipt. And as opposed to the OCR app, I'd click expense here and manually put in the supplier value and any other data my administrator wants me to put in. And if that was a VAT receipt and I selected a specific type of expense item, so if I was to select a business meal meeting, what that does then is it sort of takes the value of that receipt and would automatically calculate the VAT in the back end for finance, so that you would be able to review that. If there are any corrections to be made, that's easily done through the admin panel given out to finance teams. And Concur also offers an audit service that we could do that automatically for you. So I'm going to put in the amount there, click save. And now that's saved as an expense item and will sit in my profile along with all the other unsubmitted expense items, ready to be moved into an expense claim. And I typically do that every month. As you can see, important to note is the icon. So if you look at the airfare right there, you can see an icon under the figure of £889. That's a credit card icon. So I've actually paid for a airfare on my company-issued corporate credit card, and that's directly tied into my user interface. So within 48 hours, I've got a direct data feed of all the transactions that I incur on my corporate card directly into Concur. It means that I have to submit less data, and it means within finance that from a risk, fraud risk perspective, you're mitigating and improving kind of reconciliation time. So that's about sort of how you go about creating an expense item. I'll just go into adding that to a claim. Click at the bottom there, add claim. Select a number of expense items, and would be done. So that's the mobile app. That also automatically syncs into a web portal as well. So every time you create an expense item with your mobile phone, take a photo. That's loaded into your expense claim, and you can sort of process that on our kind of web application as well. the other important thing to know about Concur is that we've got a number of third parties, and we very much view ourselves as an ecosystem. And third parties have developed apps on top of Concur data or integrate with Concur. So if you've ever used Uber or these taxi apps on your phone, you're able to link those directly to Concur. Again, pulling in e-receipts. Starbucks exactly the same, pulling in e-receipts directly to Concur, improving user input and adoption. And I know we commit to the half an hour, so finally wanted to just to talk about a recent implementation with a company in London called Huddle. They're a technology company and were sort of growing rapidly. Got about 120 to 130 people across consultants and sales, ultimately a very high level of customer interaction, and they needed something that improved the way they managed their kind of day-to-day and sort of week-to-week jobs. But the particular challenge actually came from their financial controller, who was just so bogged down with not only the international expansion they were undergoing at the time, but the amount of expense claims that hit her desk, and it just prevented her from doing any any further thing that sort of improved the operations of the overall company. A very kind of tactical challenge, and something that she needed a very kind of easily an easy solution to. So key to sort of solving that was something that was easy to be rolled out, that integrated with her existing finance systems, that worked with the corporate credit cards they've issued, so that she can gain a kind of intra-month insight into the total outstanding liabilities around expenses. So because of our pre-configured HMRC best practice templates, she was able to roll out Concur within 24 hours. We have absolutely no setup or configuration fee. So it's very much a turn on, provide policy requirements. We configure that all for you so that you're good to go with a process that is HMRC recognized. The users absolutely loved it. They were spending 2-3 hours a month, and now they've got an app that they can take a photo on the fly, on the go, every time they incur an expense. So massively helped them, massively helped their financial controller. And the net result is that they gained 7 business days within finance every month from automating expenses, and that was something that really benefited Huddle. So that's about it from me. Really appreciate your time. I know that Javinder and Angie and your account managers at Nolan's will be able to help you with any questions. So feel free to email sales@Nolan Business Solutions or your account manager directly if you're interested or have any more want any more information on Concur or expenses. Thanks again for your time. Bye.